now going through this, on this journey?
Well, I don't know if I've got a top three, but I'd certainly say that just engage early is really important. Whilst the patriarch and matriarch are capable and able to have those conversations, I think that's a really important thing. Don't let it too late. And also, I suppose, don't go into it with any preconceived ideas. I mean, I don't wish for this to be an exercise in saying, well, you all need to go out and set up family offices, because in most cases, families don't need a fully functioning family office at all. In very rare situations in New Zealand is it really necessary. But what you might say is, well, that's an ambition that we can aspire to. That's the best practice for preserving and enhancing family welfare, and not only just for the benefit of the family, but for the community in which the family lives, because that's generally really important to people's legacy. And I suppose, but to just look at some of those best practices that really top sophisticated family offices have, and think, well, can we take some of those and build those into our own plan, whether it be a virtual family office, an embedded family office, or whether it just be, you know, a fairly simple estate plan. But look at some of those processes and think how can I apply those to my family. And then the final thing I would also say is where I see there's been huge problems in New Zealand is conflicts of interest and the conflation of advice and governance. Like lawyers provide advice. I think we're good at providing advice, but I think as a general proposition, lawyers are terrible at governance, and we don't do that well.
That's
and I think challenge and don't let people get entrenched in advisors entrenched in governance roles. I see that a lot in New Zealand. You get the lawyer or the accountant entrenched in the governance role. It's easy to fire your lawyer, but it's really hard to remove them from a fiduciary role. And I think once they're in that governance role, I mean, particularly as the family ages, it might have been appropriate back when the patriarch and matriarch were young and the kids were young, and so it was easy for that advisor to kind of to wear all those different hats and fulfill all those different functions. But as increasingly now, that generation are getting much older, they're dying, and their children are in their 50s in many cases, and you've got an advisor who's sort of trying to fulfill a whole bunch of roles. And I think find people who are really good at governance, who understand governance, and bring them into your family office. Let them provide that independent perspective, and keep the lawyers and the accountants as advisors, and that's what they do best. I think separating those two functions is really important in my view.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. Firstly, that if you have created wealth or you have money sitting there, because I'm a really deep believer in long-term value add for investing, I wouldn't let that money, because it does take a while to set up and decide what defines your family, don't stop that you from investing your money. So it's not, that they can be two separate decisions, and so you shouldn't sort of be paralysed by the thought you're setting up a family, you have to set up this family office. I would think about actually really what you mean by a family office, and as I said earlier, what defines family. And I would say, and this is sort of probably from my own and my father's experiences, there's one thing setting up a family office with the best intent. So, you say, well, I have these causes I want to support, and then I have these things I want to invest in. And even if I said that now, for my grandchildren, they may have completely different ideals. They should not be burdened, in my view, by just because the person many generations ago had created that wealth. Wealth has been created since then. There's got to sort of be a human dynamic in what a family office is. So, and that's about the beneficiaries as well as the people managing the office for you, or your advisors, or your governance. So mine would be around the investing side. I think, yes, it's part of a family office, but if you do have money, there's nothing to stop you thinking that because you don't have a family office, you can't invest it. And secondly, think about that term of family and what that means through generations for you. And, you don't have to be too prescriptive up front. It can evolve. So, you know, and that's where a foundation could be good, or even just how you operate. So it is baby steps. Everything doesn't have to be set up day one.
The fourth thing I'd say is just keep it simple as well. I think in New Zealand we've got a lot of structure. You know, people walk into their lawyer's office and they really all they need is a will, but they come out with 3 trusts. I think I see that all the time in New Zealand. We've developed this obsession with trusts over the last 30 years, and those things are causing big problems for families. And so I just say keep it simple. If a trust, in many families, many wealthy families, a trust will be valuable. You probably don't need 3. You certainly don't need 13, like we see in some structures. So I just keep it simple and focus not so much on the structure. Because I think in New Zealand we have a lot of structure but very little process within that structure. I think the process is more important than the structure. So just have the simple structure, just concentrate on governing it well and having strong processes within it.
And I would say just on wills, from friends or colleagues and my sort of experience, I think the worst thing I think you can do if you are the creator of that wealth is not communicate what's in your will, not necessarily in detail, or give it before you die. I've seen so many just quite heart-wrenching situations where either the children expected, through a vacuum of not actually being prescribed what was going to happen, rightly or wrongly, and families being quite devastated as a unit by not really knowing what was happening and the difference with actually what the reality of it was. So it's a really difficult one because I know people, you know, there's a pull about how much you communicate or not, but I think some communication in however you know, way you think is appropriate is important. I've had one example. It was a family, a really good friend of mine passed away. He had quite a lot of wealth, and then his whole family had sort of been expecting that a certain thing was happening. Then they found that the kids, none of them were to get anything until they turned 40, and these kids were in their 20s, and it just, one, it was such a shock. But secondly, it was like, where did that come from? You know, why? So there wasn't even understanding as to why he put that in his will. So even if it's before or even if you're hearing about it after, explanations about what you want, I think, are important for the dynamics of the people left behind.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both.